Well, hey there, this is Frank, and welcome to my shop again. We're going to start part 2 of the wall cabinets, the shop cabinets for my wall. As you can see, I've got the cabinets up onto the wall, and I also made the shelves and trimmed them out with Paducah on the front of the shelves as well. So that turned out really good. So now I'm ready to go ahead and start constructing the design that I created for the doors. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so the doors that I'm going to make are 2 different sizes for the 2 different cabinets that I've got, the 36-inch and the 32-inch. And the style I'm going to have is kind of like a shaker style, but for the shop I like this to be a flush, a completely flush door. That way dust doesn't start to settle on the bottom edge here from your panel. So, and also the cabinets this is for the 32-inch cabinet, so it would be normally 16 inches is half, but I step it back about a 1/16 of an inch. That way when I put the 2 doors onto the cabinet, I'll have about an 1/8 inch gap down the center, which is a reveal, but it also, the doors won't hit each other when they open. So I'm going to be trimming out the door, again in 2-inch Paducah, and the same thing on the smaller door, the 32-inch doors by almost 14 inches. That will be trimmed out in Paducah as well. So the plywood, it'll actually be a plywood center. Again, the birch plywood center like I've been doing on these cabinets. And so what I'll end up doing is cutting the plywood out to a 32-inch by 11/15/16 and also 28-inch by 9 15/16. So based on that, we'll take a look and we'll take a look at our layout for the plywood. So here's our 4x8 sheet of plywood, and I'm going to have 6 different doors for the 3 different cabinets, and it kind of shows it again. I'm going to cut this into thirds, so I'll cut it here, I'll cut it here, and then I'll break these down onto the table saw like I normally do. So those are for the larger cabinets, and these are for the 28-inch cabinets. Then I've got the Paducah. I've got enough Paducah here to be able to do this. And what I did is I measured the board sizes that I had, and I've got 3 different boards that I want to go ahead and use for this. One of them is a 11.5. The other one's 11.5 inches wide. They're both 84 inches long. And then I have another board that's 17 inches by 72 inches. So what I did is I used SketchUp, and I created my board sizes first, and then I broke down the cabinets, the cabinet pieces for the 2-inch Paducah, and I color coded them so I know that I have enough of the right sizes for each of the door panels, and then I laid them out including my saw kerfs. So you can see that, you know, my larger panels are here for the 36-inch cabinets. The 32-inch cabinets are yellow. Then I've got the other pieces for the 36-inch cabinets are in orange, and the top and bottom rails for the 32 cabinets are in green. So I've got a little bit of wood left over here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to get started and breaking down the plywood into thirds, and then we'll start doing all the milling on the Paducah, and then we'll do the assembly of the stiles and rails onto the birch plywood, and we'll finish them up with some polyurethane, wipe-on polyurethane like I've been doing, and we'll get them mounted onto the cabinets and finish up this project as part 2. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now I've got my sheet of plywood broken down into thirds. But one thing I wanted to kind of show people out there that are maybe beginners or are new to woodworking or new to cabinetry making, if you take a look at the piece of plywood, it looks pretty good. But the one thing you have to notice, and you got to be careful of, is when they put on their veneer ply of Baltic birch, there's actually a seam that's right here. There's another seam that's here, and it's another seam that's here. And it's just a different type of grade of plywood that you can get into your local areas. And when you get down, you can kind of start to see that seam. And where it becomes critical is like what I'm doing. I've got panels I'm going to be making, and I really don't want to have a seam like this to be right on the edge of the panel. In other words, the panel, let's say it gets cut here, and then I've just got this little strip. It just wouldn't look good. For the shop, I think it would be fine for my wood shop, but I'm able to, on these smaller cabinets, the 20-inch cabinets, there are 4 pieces of veneer that are here, and I'm able to go, and these panels are actually smaller than the size of the veneer. So I'm going to specifically make cuts right at the joint where the veneer is made, and then I'll cut my panel out from that, so that in these doors I won't see any kind of splices from the veneer from the factory. So let's go ahead, and I've got this ripped down, so I'll go ahead and get my table saw set up, and we'll start cutting these panels up. Okay, so the next thing is to start to mill up all the Paducah. I took the 17-inch board that I had and I cut it down to about 10 3/4 inches. That way I can start doing thickness planing on that board and leave the other piece of board still at its 1 1/8 inch thickness. So first thing I needed to do, the board had a little bit of a warp to it, so I'm using my 12-inch joiner to take that face down so that it's nice and flat. Then I'll go ahead and take it to the thickness planer and take it to the proper thickness of the plywood. So let's go ahead and continue on. Flat surface. So we've got one side that's really good. We'll go ahead and get it planed on the other. Now that we've got the boards face jointed and edge jointed, I'm going to go ahead and put them through my thickness planer and get them down to the right thickness. That's going to match the birch plywood I'm using for the middle panel. So let's go ahead and get started and start planing down these boards. table saw set up for 2 inches, and I'm going to take the boards of Paducah and rip them down to a 2-inch width so that I could use them for trimming out the panels. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's rip down our stiles and our rails. I've started to break down now the strips of 2-inch Paducah. As you saw earlier, went and cut up the 2-inch stiles and rails for the doors, and then we go back to the drawing and we go ahead and break those down into different sections for the stiles and rails. So I've already started doing that. Started to cut first the rails because you want to make sure that the stiles fit accordingly. So I've gone through and cut all of my 9 and 15/16 inch rails, and I also cut all the 11 and 15/16 inch rails. So as you can see, I've got my piles of rails already cut and ready to go. So now what I'm doing is I'm just basically placing a couple of the rails onto one of the panels, and then I'm getting ready to go ahead and set up the chop saw for a 36-inch cut, and I'll cut all of these out, and then I've got 2 more out of the second board, and then I'll start with the 32-inch, which are the yellow pieces, and get those completed. And that'll get me all my stiles and rails cut, and then we can start assembling the rails to the panels first. So as you can see, I went and cut a couple of the stiles for the larger door, and I'm just kind of putting them up against, this is all loose, so I'm kind of putting it up against the door, measuring it up to the rails and stiles, and I have one slight adjustment to make to trim it just a little bit shorter, which I did at my chop saw, and I think we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of the 36-inch stiles, and then I'll start working on the 32-inch stiles. All right, so now the next stage is we're going to take one of the panels and put 2 of the stiles onto the panel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on each of these stiles in the panel where I want to put a biscuit joint. I'm basically going to use biscuits to assemble the stiles and rails to the panels. I'm going to do the stiles first because the rails will actually be flush to them at the top. So my focus here is when I do my glue up is to make sure that I am absolutely flush to the end of the panels with these stiles. So as you can see, I've got a mark here. I took a pencil and did a light mark with 2 marks here. I did the same thing on the other side of the board. Then next, what I'll do is I'll set the stile aside that matches the 2 areas. I should say the 2 ends. And then over here, I'll actually go and make my biscuit cuts right at this location. And then that corresponding stile, I'll have it over here, move my panel out of the way. I have a couple of bench stops here, and I'll go ahead and make my biscuit cut here and biscuit cut here. Once I make the biscuit cuts for one end of this panel, what I'll end up doing is then I'll take a couple of biscuits and join them together to hold it together. Because once you do this, I want to make sure that this stile stays with this panel on this end, because that's how I mark them accordingly. Now again, what I like about biscuit joinery is it helps to keep the stile flush with the panel. And that's the main reason why I'm using it. Plus it does have the construction strength to hold, you have more of a glue surface to hold the stiles and rails together onto the plywood. You know, I like this method. It's probably a little unorthodox, using a 3/4 inch piece of plywood for the panel, but I really like it because I want that flush look. I don't want to have a recessed look and then have dust collect onto that panel, because you know as well as I do, workshops get dusty. So it really makes a good beefy door. It's flush on both sides, and it actually turns out looking really, really good. So let's go ahead and get ready, and we'll start doing our biscuit slot cutting and start getting into a groove of an assembly process. Again, the main reason why I put them on there is just to make sure I keep the panel together. So as you can see, we've got one done, and we'll go ahead and do that for the other 6 doors on the smaller doors, the 36-inch doors, and then we'll do the other 6 32-inch doors. And then once we get this done, the next step would be to go ahead and glue up these stiles onto these panels. So it looks like I've got some cutting and assembling to do. So let's get started. Now I'm going to go ahead and start putting these rails, actually the stiles, onto the panels. So I'm going to use the same process of marking it and making biscuit joints to keep the surface flush. And after we make all the cuts, I'll put the biscuits in just to hold the piece that belongs to that side, and then we'll do the glue up. I'm going to end up putting a biscuit here right at this joint because I want half the biscuit to go into the stile as well. Same thing on this end. I'll probably do it right where the stile meets or the rail meets the stile, and then I'll end up putting two more biscuits kind of centered within that panel. I think that should work. Yeah, I think I better mark the Paducah where that rail intersects, just to be safe. Okay, we'll take some biscuits that belong to that. That way that'll hold the piece on so that this stile will make sure that it's on this end, and I don't accidentally reverse it on the other end when I do the glue up, because then I'm going to have a problem aligning them. So now we do one side. I'll take it over, flip it around, and we'll do this side. Okay, we've got that one done, cut, fitted. I'll put it aside, and I've got 2, 3, 4, 5 more panels of that size, and I got 4 of the smaller 28-inch size. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and get this finished up. We're ready to go ahead and start the glue up on these cabinet panels. So what I did is I took the biscuits out of the stiles, and I'll go ahead and spread some glue onto the stile, put a little bit into the biscuit joints on the panel as well as the stile, put it on and do the other side, and then clamp her up. I work to try to get some of that glue spread out, make sure that I've got some glue on both sides of the where the biscuit joint is. The rest of the glue will kind of spread out itself. I'm pretty successful on my glue ups using this method. Okay. Okay. Spin it around. Go ahead and do the other side. Okay. All new. Okay. And we got her glued up. A little bit of the squeeze out. Clean it up with a wet rag. We remain flush. I think we're good to go. So this is one panel glued up and several more to go. All right, we're ready to go ahead and start to drill the 35mm holes on the inside panels. And that's going to accept the hinges that I have, the flush mount hinges that will go inside the cabinets. Now what I did is I kind of set up my woodpecker's table so that I've determined the right distance from the Fastener bit to the fence. I read the instructions that came with the hinges, and it gave me that dimension of 1 3/8 is the center of the hole. So I've got the Fastener bit put in. I also created the stop locations or found the stop locations. So I'll end up putting a stop down, making a drill, flip it up, put this stop down, make a drill and flip it up, and then go get the next panel. So, and I hooked up my, just got a portable hose to my shop collection system to kind of capture all these big chips. So let's go ahead and get started. Next, I'm going to, now that I've got the holes drilled for these hinges, the Blum hinges, I'm going to go ahead and put them inside, and then I've got 2 holes to drill. I'm going to pre-drill, which are these holes within the bracket that'll hold it to the panel itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get those drilled on each of the panels, and then I'll start the sanding and then finishing the panels. When I put them in, I just want to use my square just to make sure that it's lined up nice and square. And once I have it square, I'm using my self-centering bit. Go ahead and put a couple holes in, and it's ready to go then. Okay, there we have it. Now that I have the holes drilled for the screws and the 35mm hole for the Blum gauges or the Blum hinges, I'm going to go ahead and start my sanding process. In order to kind of get these things leveled up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and start off with 120 grit sandpaper. Hey there everyone. Well, I got a little bit of Dave Matthews playing in the background, and I'm doing the fun part, which is sanding. I've got all of these doors sanded. I actually started off with 80 grit in order to get a level surface with the wood and the birch plywood, with the Paducah and the birch plywood. So that's all done, sanded both sides and all the ends, and just finished putting on the first coat of a polyurethane clear satin rub. That's my finish of choice for my varnishing or my polyurethaning. All right, Dave Matthews, wrap it up. So, that takes a long time to get all the sanding done, get it done right, get it nice and smooth, but boy, if you could feel these doors, they feel like they are all one piece of wood. You put a blindfold on, you couldn't tell where the joints are, okay? And that's the way I like the doors and drawer fronts that I do. So, first coat down, 2 more coats to go. And that's the polyurethane that I use. So, let this go ahead and dry. Tomorrow I'll go and do a 400 grit knockdown on the surface, and then I'll do another another coat of that polyurethane. Okay? Other than that, we're going to go ahead and let Sade take us away, and next step, put on hardware and get these bad boys mounted to the cabinets. Well, we're done with the sanding and the putting on the polyurethane clear satin finish to all these cabinet doors. So we're ready to go ahead and install the hardware and get these mounted up onto the cabinets. They turned out pretty good. They are baby bottom smooth. All right, let's go ahead and get started putting the hardware on. I am using some Blum hinges, and I got them several years ago for another shop that I was going to put together, or actually I was in the process of putting together. So these are going to come in handy. I've had these in my inventory for a good 10 years, and it's time for me to get to use them. But here's the packaging. Again, they're Blum hinges. They are, let's see here, model number 55840. And I love these frameless box construction type hinges. They basically will cover the cabinet itself on the outside. So these are going to be perfect. So let's go ahead and get started and get these installed. So I basically took them out of the package and got all the parts into a tray here that's going to be easy for me to make sure I don't lose a screw. And first thing I'm going to do is open these hinges up. And we'll go ahead and put them into their holes that I had drilled earlier. And we'll screw them in. Now I'm going to screw these in by hand because I want to be able to feel any kind of tension or torque that I've got going on. I definitely don't want these screws to break off. Okay, that's one side. All right. We've got them on. That's ready to go. This door is ready to go. Okay, so I took the instructions off of the package from Rockler on these Blum hinges, and it gave me some dimensions. So what I did is I measured the dimension of the bottom inside of my cabinet up to the line. Okay, come on, let's get focused here. Up to the line where the this hinge plate is going to get applied and screwed into the cabinet. And this is for the cabinet plate. Then the instructions said to take 37 millimeters from the edge of the cabinet over to where the hole should be drilled. So I went and drew the 37 millimeters for a left and right side of the cabinet. I actually placed the clip onto this template. So here's the clip. And I just positioned it on it and drilled a couple holes so that it has the right position at the 37 millimeters. And in drilling the holes, then I'm going to take my awl, go inside the hole, make a mark on side the cabinet. I'll do that on the left side, and then when I do the right side of the door, I'll do the same thing for the right side. And that gives me perfect placement on putting this hinge clip onto the cabinet. So let's go ahead and get one done. Okay, poked it through with the awl, and now I'm just going to make it a little bit deeper. Make it easier for the screws to go in. Okay. There is a specific way for these hinge plates to go on, so you want to follow the instructions, but this clip goes toward the back of the cabinet. So that's what I'm going to do. Get the first one started. Find the hole. There it is. Get the second one started. So the upper one, all I have to do is take my template and flip it around, and I've got the same dimensions. Come up here, and I'm going to make my awl holes, make them a little bit bigger. Get my clip. Get that bad boy started. Okay, so now my hinges are on, and let's go ahead and zoom out here. My hinges are on, and I'm ready to go ahead and attach the door. This is the fun part. I'm going to position my ladder just right so I can kind of hold this and get it on at the same time. These clips are pretty easy. They just snap into place. As long as I can get some leverage. There we go. They just snap in place and they close. Now, any kind of hinge like this is always going to have some adjustments. And with these Blum hinges, you can adjust the door left to right and up and down. And with those movements, you can even kind of tilt your door a little bit in case you have something that's a little bit out of square. So I'm going to go ahead and make these adjustments, and then we'll just continue on putting these doors on all the cabinets. Well, now that we've got all the doors on all the cabinets, it's time to put the handle hardware on all the doors. So what I did is I decided to make a jig for that so that it's consistent for each of the left and right side doors. So I measured the distance. Since these strips are 2 inches, I want to center it at 1 inch. And I came up to what I thought was somewhat reasonable for me to grab that handle, and which was 2.5 inches off the bottom is where the handle will start, and then it'll go up 5 1/16 of an inch, which is the center to holes on the handles that I'm using. I'm using some brush nickel type of handles here on these doors that I got at a yard sale. So I went and made a jig, and being that I made the jig, as you can see, it kind of has a side, it's kind of a T. I did my dimensions 1 inch over from the edge of the door. I came up the 2.5 inches, and that's my center. Came up to 5 1/16, which is the top of the handle. And I marked it bottom and left side. Since the hole is common, it can be used for a left or right side door. And all I have to do is put the door into the corner, and we're set. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and put one of the handles on one of the doors here. So it's my right-handed door, so I'm going to put obviously the right hand is sitting out, right hand bottom. I'm going to basically hold on to the template, make sure my drill is straight. And make the hole. Next, let's go ahead and put the hardware on. These are always fun. Go ahead and get it started. Then I'm going to go ahead and finish it up with my powered screwdriver. Okay. Voila. One door down, 9 to go. Well, these cabinets are done. We are all wrapped up. And that's for at least this first phase of cabinets. So that's what they look like. It turned out pretty good. I really like how they look and how they're placed. So I've got more cabinets to make, like right here, and I've got base cabinets to do for the chop saw. So I've got a bunch more cabinets to make. But that's pretty much my build for part 1 and part 2 of the shop cabinets. If I open them up. Turned out pretty good. Well, that's it for this part one, part two of the shop cabinet build. I'm pretty satisfied with how they turned out. And like I said, I've got several more to do, but I like what I see so far. So thank you for joining me on on these two videos. Please stay tuned for additional projects that are coming up into my wood shop. I have obviously more cabinets to make, as I said, some base cabinets for the chop saw, and I'm going to incorporate a top that's going to be level for not only the chop saw, but also for my radial arm saw. Yes, I said radial arm saw. I've got a pretty hefty duty DeWalt, a Delta radial arm saw that I just won't part with, and it does have some use in my wood shop. So that's going to be coming up. I have additional projects for making a rolling cart to store my 4-foot cutoffs. I don't know how many times you've been in your shop and you have several little pieces from 1 foot to 2 foot to 3 foot to 4 foot that you don't want to throw away and they end up in garbage cans or on the shop floor. Well, I'm going to be designing a 4 foot by 4 foot by 5 foot rolling cart with a bunch of kind of pigeonholes that you can store those short pieces in and get them out of your way, and it's easier to get into taking a look at those pieces. If there's a piece of wood that you want to get, you don't have to go through a whole stack of 60, 70 pieces. Then I'm going to make a cart for my plywood storage to better organize that, easier to get my sheet goods in and out, and then continue on with some shop cabinets. I've got some lights, some lamps that I want to make for the house. So we got a lot of different projects kind of set up. So stay tuned to my channel. If you like the video, please go ahead and press the like button. And I really appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe. You'll get notifications on new videos that I've uploaded onto my channel. All right, this is Frank. I'm going to sign off, and we'll see you around the block. Thanks for joining me.